we hit it? Okay, we should be live. Hello, my gentle and, of course, very modern apes. I hope everyone's doing well out there. I understand this is a bit of an impromptu stream, and you might not have known it was happening, but that's because, as I was telling David here right before we went live, I wasn't sure when this was happening either because I've got virtual orientation out the wazoo, and I wasn't sure when I was going to be able to actually slip this into the schedule. But here we are, we're ready to go. We've got a real fun time planned for the next hour and a half or so. But before we do, why are we having the stream? Well, we're having it because we're actually raising funds for David here, David P. Neff. He's a friend of the channel. You've seen him around before. You've probably been to his channel as well. And David, this channel is obviously first and foremost an educational channel. I think education is vitally important, and anybody who can get it should. Knowledge for knowledge's sake is paramount, I think. And David is currently getting ready to attend school, but we've reached some little snafus. So David, tell us the tale, your plight, and we'll kind of get into that as well.
Okay, sure. So my name is David. I will hopefully be attending the University of Maryland, Baltimore County in the fall. My major currently is biochemistry and molecular biology with a minor in music. So yeah, I've had some issues financially with COVID-19 and all of that, and I'm working 2 jobs right now, working at a local retail store and striving for Lyft. And I will also hopefully be starting. I just actually got the offer letter today that I got hired for a job on campus. So that'll be great. That'll be really helpful. So
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, it sucks that you have to take that on, but in the end, at least it's going to help funnel things in and pay for the education. In the meantime, though, that's what we're here trying to do. We're raising money so that David can get out of the red into the black, and be raring and ready to go when the fall starts.
Yep,
because
exactly.
God knows there's like a million different secret fees that they spring on you in academia, from textbooks to supplies and clickers and all the stuff of the modern era. We've already got quite a few people here. Thank you for being here, guys. Tiktalis says, got here a bit late. Is this going to be an open mic? I wasn't planning on an open mic, but we are going to be reviewing an intelligent design video. So, I mean, if folks want to hop in, David, it's okay with you. It's okay with me. We're just going to be dunking on some videos, having a good time, and and raising some funds. Pinworm, incredibly happy I found your channel. Thank you, Pinworm. It's great to see you here. Zen Lizard, UMBC. Holy crap, it's been a while since I met anyone going to UMBC. David's going.
Yep. UMBC is definitely not as well known as the University of Maryland, but it is a great school, very high research focused. Our claim to fame is we were number 17 in the basketball, and we beat the number one seed a couple years ago. I think that was University of Virginia, something like that.
Dream killers. That's what we call you guys.
Yeah.
Sports, but I can recognize a dream killer when I see him. That's hilarious.
Yep. And our second claim to fame is chess. We are very much a chess school.
School.
Yeah, we have a very good chess club and do chess tournaments and stuff like that. And as someone who loves chess,
yeah. I'm horrible at chess, but I did live vicariously through the Netflix show The Queen's Gambit and felt like I was learning chess. Captain Gargoyle sent us $5 already. Thank you, Captain Gargoyle. I will tell you, I will send those funds to David Neff, but the way that you're going to want to donate, if you can help him out with his cause of funding education, is going to be in the description. So we've got his Patreon, we've got his PayPal, and we've got his Venmo down there. But I will still send your $5 his way. Thank you very much. He says, David's a cool dude. Take my money. No, Captain Gargoyle, you didn't do it wrong. I did it wrong. I should have started off with that. This is my first fundraiser, so you guys have to cut me a little bit of slack. This is a learning adventure for the lot of us. And good Lord, we've got something to cover today. I had a video sent to me, and I'll stop periodically and re-bring up where we can find these links for fundraising for David here. But the video that we're covering today was shot by way via Twitter. It's from this channel called Deflate. I know very little about Deflate. The guy that runs it, he's got a nice haircut. He's pretty slick looking, but outside of that, not much of what he says is, I've at least imagined, is going to be of merit. But we're both going in blind, so it's going to be a fun video to go through. Luca says, hey Luca, thanks for being here. Love to see you. Hope you're doing well. And with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and hop over and share the screen so that we can get going on this vid, this piece of media, because that's what we do here. All right, hold on. Let me pull this up. Okay, can you see that, David?
Yes, I can see that.
So already we're off to an incredible start. Basics of intelligent design, Darwin's nightmare. How imposing. We've got this nice thumbnail over here to the right with poor Darwin. He says, I've got no evidence. And and Deflate is like, yeah, buddy, I know. And he's wearing like a shirt with I have no idea what molecule that is, but you know, I don't really care. I'm not a chemist. I don't do the chemistry stuff. I did my time in undergrad, and I'm washing my hands of all chemistry. David, you're going to be doing some chemistry yourself, huh? You've got that because you're going to virology, yes?
Yeah, I want to go into like virology and infectious diseases and possibly some evolutionary biology.
Cool.
So yeah, there's a lot of chemistry involved. I mean, my title of my degree is biochemistry and molecular biology, so there is going to be a lot of chemistry.
But the title is biochem and molecular biology. That is like strict chem. You're going to be doing inorganic 1 and 2, organic 1 and 2, biochem 1, and you probably have a 2 to take. That's going to be intense. My undergraduate degree, I got a BSA in pre-professional animal science, so it's like the pre-vet path that people tend to take, because that was originally my plan. And the chemistry was insane. It was what I just said, except minus biochem 2. You know, I had to take inorganic chem 1 and 2, ochem 1 and 2, and biochem 1. And the whole time it was like, my brain is just not wired for that. It was overcompensation on my part to get those classes done with a decent grade. So absolutely kudos to you, because God, that's not my realm. I'm a monkey person, you know, I study the monkeys. We also have to appreciate this description here. All right, Deflate, 12K subs, almost 13K subs. That's not too bad. It's a popular-ish channel, you know.
Yep, and I hate to interrupt you, but we have a $4.99 super chat from Balthazar228. I heard infectious diseases just grows on you.
Man, Balthazar, I think that's a little bit of a reach. That would have worked better with like the mycology fungi kind of realm. If David was being like he was planning on becoming a mycologist, I think that would have hit a little better. But I appreciate it nevertheless. I actually think bad puns are more satisfying than good puns are. So
I agree.
We appreciate it. I will absolutely send that David's way. Keep in mind, the best way to support him is going to be the links in the description, but I probably should have some kind of running banner. I could have prepared better for this, but I'll still send it towards David. So Deflate here has this excellent description. And David, I don't know if you had the opportunity to kind of eyeball this description here, but it really is something else, because so much of it is wrong. And I think when you dress as sharp as Deflate here does, he's got the specs, he's got the blue shirt, he's got the globe in the background, clearly a science lover if he's a globe head. And I'm thinking to myself, if this guy's gonna be walking the walk, why isn't he talking the talk? Because there's quite a bit incorrect here in this description. Do we want to get into that before we touch on this video? What do you think?
Sure. Actually, let's see here. I am going to try and pull up the link on my end because I have a hard time reading the description there. Let's see.
I'm happy. I'll read it aloud too, just because, so people can appreciate my nasally mellifluous voice. All right. When Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species in 1859, he was painstakingly aware of the fact that the fossil record diametrically opposed his theory.
All right, stop. Yeah, there's a lot of things wrong. So one of the things Darwin did admit in his book is that's the reason why um, that there's an incomplete fossil record. And one of the things is that his theory predicted a um, dinosaur to bird transition, which was found in Darwin's lifetime. It's called Archaeopteryx. So in his own lifetime, he made predictions about what we would find in the fossil record, and guess what? We found it. So
There's also too, we have to appreciate the setup of this rhetoric already, because using diametrically opposed to his theory is quite different from the fossil record is incomplete. And I
right,
found that creationists and ID proponents alike really love to take the question is currently unanswered to the question will never be answered, right? They love taking that pathway. Which is not how science works. The unanswered questions are like the lifeblood of big S science.
right,
But you're absolutely correct. Darwin discussed this idea of transitional forms, and Archaeopteryx lithographica was found in Germany, I believe it was, during his own lifetime. Neanderthal man as well, which would become
right,
Homo neanderthalensis, was also discovered while Darwin was still alive. So
right, and
he had this validation long before he passed away. I mean,
oh yeah.
evolutionary theory is just constantly getting W's.
Right. And there's a very important prediction that evolution makes, and that is with how it relates to evo devo. The further you go back in time, the more closely two related organisms are going to look. So if we're going to predict, okay, humans and chimpanzees share a common ancestor, the fossils that are oldest should look more quote unquote ape-like. And I really hate using that term because humans are still apes and we are still ape-like, but I digress. Um, and this is exactly what we find. Neanderthals, Homo erectus, Homo naledi, and all that. They are our oldest hominid fossils, and they do look less human-like and more ape-like. Um,
Right.
and there's been some who maybe try and claim that it's due to a hypermutation or hyper inbreeding, but these are rescuing devices, and it ignores the fact that we have the radiometric dating, and this radiometric dating is simply the icing on the cake. We predict these are going to be the oldest fossils because they look more similar to our um, non-human primates, and yeah, that's exactly what we find. So this is a very specific prediction, two very specific predictions that evolution theory makes that are that is independently confirmed by two different fields of science. We got the paleontology that confirms that yeah, these are the oldest. This is what we find, and then we got the physics and all behind it that or the geology that confirms the ages through radiometric dating and
Well,
luminescence
correct.
dating.
I mean, it
And
would be both. It would be all three of those, right? I mean,
right,
you've got paleontology that's confirmed by the physics behind radiometric dating, as well as the geology. But I think too, the elephant in the room is that it's genetics too. I mean,
yeah, exactly,
genetics. Very frequently, you hear from the ID proponents, from the Earth creationists, it's like, it's genetics. It's sperm and egg that matters. It's like, hey, buddy, you're most closely related to a chimpanzee, and a chimpanzee is most closely related to you. A chimp shares more in common genomically when you're working with just sheer comparative genomics. So setting up alignments and looking at the similarities. A chimp or a bonobo, so genus Pan, shares more with us than they do with any other animal too. I think that's rarely appreciated. People tend to be like, humans we share 98.8% with chimpanzees. That's true. And they share 98.8% with us as well, which is equally as important to consider. Because when you set up that phylogenetic tree, you end up with a fork with the hominins and the panins up close, kind of most distally, most recently. But the gorillans split off earlier, as do the pongans. So that has to be appreciated as well. It's not
yep,
just the radiometric dating, which is important, as you said, because evolutionary theory makes a very clear, very basic prediction. We should see morphologic change over geologic time when we're looking at the paleontologic record. And we see
right,
that in spades ubiquitously across
right,
our fossil record. Um,
yep. and I find
Oh, go
and,
ahead.
and I find and I find this to be one of the biggest pieces of evidence for evolution is that you do have multiple independent lines of evidence from independent fields of science, all pointing to the same exact conclusion. That is something that young Earth creationists do not have at all. And
Well, and we got to stop here, and we got to give the young Earth creationists actually more credit than the ID proponents, because at least the young Earth creationists have the cojones to say, well, if young Earth creationism is true, we should maybe kind of see something sort of that looks like X, right?
right,
None of these predictions ever come to fruition, or they don't get tested at all because they have the cojones to make the prediction, but God forbid they actually test them.
cough, cough,
But
Dr. Jeanson.
yeah, the Croton people. Well, what has it been, a decade? But then
Yeah,
you get the likes of the ID proponents who will say it's very clear that things in biology, from as microscopic as the cell or DNA up to the complex ecosystems that we see, these are very clearly designed. They have intent behind them, which is fine as a statement that you might make, like at a bar, or to a friend. But if you're trying to make yourself scientifically relevant or empirically sound, there's got to be more to it than a statement like that. You have to come up with mechanisms, a coherent model, testable predictions that you could make that could distinguish design from the naturally evolved. And ID fails here, where young Earth creationism at least attempts to make predictions. ID doesn't do it. They've got no model. They've got no mechanisms, and they don't deign to make that attempt. Have a quick drink
yep,
there.
sorry.
That was like my. We're too early for a mic drop, but we're already at it, and we've read one sentence.
Yeah,
Um,
and so yeah, and young Earth creationism actually can be directly tested against radiometric dating and a whole host of other variety of evidence. That being said, something like Dr. Michael Behe actually does accept universal common ancestry. He just sprinkles that in with intelligent design and God moving the hand or whatever, and that is not falsifiable at all because it does not make any real world testable predictions.
Precisely, and I've been quite honest here on the channel. I have no problem with ID in the sense that it's close to theistic evolution, which is pretty much what Michael Behe proposes. I mean, he does the irreducible complexity dance, but he won't actually specify very much that's actually irreducibly complex, because that would subject him to potential testing. So it
Right,
tends to be the same vague thing that mostly theistic evolutionists will propose, where they're like, yeah, it's clear God had to do some of it. Maybe he's orchestrated some of this, and to me, that's indistinguishable to evolution. So these guys and I are probably going to get along on most points, which is kind of funny because the top comment here is something along those lines. They say intelligent design is just God of the gaps. Christianity has denied evolution and spent billions trying to disprove it. Now Christianity wants to jump ship and say, well, evolution is a fact. God must have done it. To prove anything beyond reasonable doubt, must provide a mechanism. And there is no mechanism for intelligent design, just like there's no mechanism for a biblical God. And I would tend to say, I don't think that God is something that can necessarily be proven or disproven from a deistic sense. So I don't know that I would take as hard a line as Gondwana Ape here has. But from the stance of intelligent design, I would agree. And I don't suspect we're going to get a mechanism or any set of criteria in this video.
right, exactly. And of course, I've heard some creations say that the mechanism is that God spoke, but that really doesn't answer any of the questions.
Yeah, that would be like saying the mechanism for the magnetic field reversals that we experience on Earth is, oh well, it's the dynamo. It's like the people who proposed the idea of the dynamo couldn't just say, oh, it's the dynamo. Giving it a name isn't the same thing as explaining the actual mechanisms at work
Right,
behind this idea, behind this process, which discovering the dynamo and actually fleshing it out was a huge undertaking, right? This is something that wasn't just, the Earth
right.
just does it. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yep. God
Um,
just waved his magic wand saying abracadabra and poof. That's not really an answer.
exactly. And I have massive amounts of respect for those Christians and other religious individuals who are like, look, I believe that God influenced evolution or set it in place as a mechanism, or he just did it. To me, it seems very clearly designed. But I recognize that that's a belief claim, and so I'm going to kind of keep it out of science. Like, to me, that's chill. Like, whatever. I'm fine with that. The problem comes when you get individuals like Deflate here, who we're going to see momentarily. I imagine, because again, I'm going into this pretty blind. He's going to paint this picture as if intelligent design is up to task for going head to head against an idea of like a kind of naturalistic origin and progression of life. Which, I mean, Behe and Meyer don't even claim this, right? Like they'll make statements, but they're not actually going out there and proposing these peer-reviewable, I guess I should say, ideas and papers that can be put to task, if you will. But we've made it through one sentence. So sentence number 2. Ever since Darwin's time, paleontologists have put their finger on the so-called Cambrian explosion.
Cambrian explosion, drink.
Yeah, Cambrian explosion, drink. I'm almost done already because I'm almost done with my first drink already because this has already been an excruciating description. But
yeah, I want to point out a couple.
Oh, go ahead.
Just a couple of very important notes about the Cambrian. The Cambrian was a period of, I think, like 50 million years or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but somewhere along that line. And there were, by the time we even get to the Cambrian, there were entire phyla that were already extinct. And I think the Cambrian explosion or the Cambrian radiation, I think, isn't that only like 1/3 of the phyla from the Cambrian?
I mean, to me, the Cambrian explosion is abused as a phrase, very much in the same way that mitochondrial Eve is abused as a phrase. These people, I guarantee you, I guess I shouldn't say, I'm very confident that we will not hear the phrase the Ediacaran mentioned in this video. And the Ediacaran is where we see the emergence of quite a few phyla. And as we continue to investigate Precambrian rock, which tends to be Ediacaran, although sometimes it gets a bit earlier than that, we find more and more and more organisms, all of which seem to hint at this origin of like bilateria or animalia, and it's just not that mysterious anymore. That's not to say there aren't a ton of questions, but it is to say that the Cambrian explosion isn't like this, in paleontology anyways, it's not considered to be like this mystical period where it's like, well, we've got no choice, boys. We've got to accept intelligent design. It sure does seem like everything just popped into being. Right. I mean, that's like an idea. You could maybe take that stance in like the 1980s. Right. But I think he continues. The term describes the fact that within one single geologic era called the Cambrian era, I believe the Cambrian's a period, a wide variety of fossilized animal forms show up suddenly and without any evidence of intermediate forms preceding them in the Precambrian strata. As we just mentioned, this is just false. I'm trying to remember the name of the organism. It was a big paper very recently. It was like Wicaria. Hold on. David, you speak for a sec. I'm gonna quit sharing the screen. You take this away while I suss this out, because I want to be able to actually provide the paper for the folks who are curious.
Okay, yeah, sure. So basically, the big problem here is the geological era, or period, as it's better called, is a period about 55.6 million years. So this is a pretty long geological period. And so it's not like everything started poofing out at once. And you also have to understand as well, once we get to the Cambrian period, you have organisms that have hard shells and hard stuff that actually are able to fossilize. Before the Cambrian, you really didn't have that. So I guess stuff before the Cambrian really just didn't fossilize well because of those limitations.
Well, it's important to appreciate that from the evolution of organisms that, pardon me, are just beginning this kind of multicellularity to the hard-bodied organisms that we tend to see exploding and capitalizing during the Cambrian. there's a soft-bodied necessary step there, right? And we do see this. We see a lot of that Precambrian extinction event. It is kind of owed to this bioturbidation that we see from the hilariously named penis worms, right? Priapolida, who are soft-bodied. We don't necessarily know that Priapolida was responsible because we're finding their hard-bodied fossils constantly, because they weren't hard-bodied, but we find their U-shaped burrows everywhere, and every now and again we'll actually find a member of Priapolida. And I believe they are Precambrian. But this is actually the paper that I was discussing. This is from 2020, so last year, April 7th, and it was a big deal when it came out, and it still is a big deal, because what we're seeing is the proposal of the earliest bilaterian. This is pretty big because it's found in the Ediacaran period. From the, we'll skip the significance, and we're going to do some serious abstract hacking here. So analysis of modern animals in Ediacaran trace fossils predict that the oldest bilaterians were very simple and small. Yes, this is the prediction. It's important to understand that this is what was laid out. Such organisms would be difficult to recognize in the fossil record, but should have been a part of the Ediacaran biota, the earliest preserved macroscopic complex animal communities. Here we describe Icaria wariunotia, at species nova from the Ediacaran member, South Australia, a simple, small organism with anterior-posterior differentiation, i.e. we're seeing a bilaterian in the flesh. We find that the size and morphology of Icaria match predictions for the progenitor of the trace fossil Helminthoid-ichnites, maybe, indicative of mobility and sediment displacement. This is your classic bioturbidation. In the Ediacaran member, Helminthoid-ichnites occurs stratigraphically below the classic Ediacaran body fossils. Together, these suggest that Icaria represents one of the oldest total group bilaterians identified from South Australia, with little deviation from the characters predicted for their last common ancestor. Further, these trace fossils persist into the Phanerozoic, providing a critical link between Ediacaran and Cambrian animals. So as the technology gets more and more advanced, we're able to actually get deeper into this Precambrian rock and find these very simple, very rarely fossilized soft-bodied animals. Now, the question might be, okay, well then, like, why did we suddenly get all of these hard-shelled, hard-bodied animals? And some people propose that it had to do with the evolution of the very simple eye, your eye spot that, it relatively quickly, honestly, evolves into something that's capable of differentiating basic shapes. It's really good to have armor when the things that are trying to eat you can see you. And all of a sudden we see this heavy selection towards harder-bodied organisms that are capable of incorporating things like calcium carbonate into their exoskeletons. But I very much doubt that we're going to see anything with regard to Icaria wariortia. We'll go with that within this video. let's continue with our reading of this description.
All right, and
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, sure. And just say, how's my audio? Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you quite well. Let me check. We're gonna get some
That's
mirroring
good.
as I check over with the chat. Let me make
That's
sure
good.
somebody else can see you too.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
bad feedback from Titan Uranus.
Yeah, because I'm getting some feedback on my headset. I don't know
Oh,
why.
is it because I'm talking so loud?
Yeah, I don't know. Try muting yourself real quick.
Scree, some hardcore feedback. There's an issue with sound input. Okay, hold on.
Yeah, David, enough is good. Gibbon is very bad. Yeah, so that fixed kind of the issue that was in my headset. I heard a bunch of screeching in my headset and wasn't sure if this was a problem with my headset or if it was a problem with um, when your end. But while we are waiting for her to fix that, I have a brief campaign update. So far in this stream, we have raised $270.38. Thank you guys so much for your generous gift, and thank you once again, Erica, for hosting this. I cannot thank you enough. And the links to donate, either GoFundMe, PayPal, Venmo, is in the description. So if you are feeling generous and want to donate, the way to do that is in the description down below.
Cool. How are we doing now? Is this better?
Oh, a million times better.
Million times better. Awesome. Okay, I switched to my good mic instead of using my Garbo mic. I don't know why I didn't start doing that in the first place, but here we are.
Oh yeah, that is a lot better.
Thank you everyone again for being here so far and for donating to David. Again, I can't stress enough this channel, first and foremost, it's an educational one. So my goal here is always to lift up individuals who are trying to further educate themselves. I think that's always a good thing. Knowledge for knowledge's sake is important in and of itself. And David, of course, is a friend of the channel, so I'm more than happy to kind of signal boost his journey here and provide hopefully some kind of like fun stuff to enjoy while we kind of do that signal boosting. Due Diligence says, please re-explain reason for donation. David, this is all you, buddy.
Yeah, sure. So this is campaigns. The reason why we are donating today is because I am going to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, hopefully in the fall, and I need some funds to help me get there. Um, I am trying to catch up with some bills and want to make sure that I am good to go for the upcoming semester. And thank you, Erica, once again for hosting this.
Man,
And
please, I'm happy to do it. I mean, listen, again, I'm very long-winded, so when you were like, yeah, like let's do like an hour and a half, I was like, it's gonna be hard to keep it to an hour and a half, honestly. If we're doing if we're gonna be looking at this video, it's going to be a hot minute, I think, because we're like we're like 2 or 3 sentences actually into the description, and
yeah,
we've got a lot to
Scott.
cover.
Yeah, Scott Duke. We need to get that David P. Neff to school. Actually, they should just hand him a bachelor's degree when he walks in the door. Thank you. I do
Wouldn't it be
appreciate it.
nice if it worked like that? That would be incredible.
Oh yeah.
Sunflower
Uh,
says that you should submit a FAFSA if you think you could qualify. Oh,
oh
you
yeah.
already, yeah,
Yep.
you already talked about that.
Yep.
Okay,
And
cool.
um, also, if you are for some reason you are not subscribed to my channel, you should go to my channel and subscribe because I have some podcasts in the works. Dr. Stephen Freeland, an evolutionary biologist and an astrobiologist, is going to be on my channel. He's also a professor at UNM BC, so he was very gracious and kind enough to agree to come on my channel. He also is worked with BioLogos, which is a very great organization.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so, yeah, I met with him the other day, and he was very generous and he's a great guy. So we're gonna be talking a little about abiogenesis, astrobiology, and how it relates to Christianity.
That's
Captain Gargoyle. David contributes a lot to these pro science and creationism discussions. Worth a few bucks. Donate, you plebs. Thank you.
Listen, as a pro gamer myself, I believe it's pronounced plebes, so you might have
Plebes.
to get on my level there, David. David's channel also has some very surprising hot tea to spill. I was very pleased with the work that you and Dan did with the Ding et al stuff.
Oh yeah.
Which was
Great.
really enjoyable. You should look into that. It's a real classic in my opinion of like a we
Oh
predict
yeah.
XYZ from the young earth creationists, and then it's like, hey, but like why didn't you look into it?
Yeah,
Um
exactly. So this is I guess I'll tell a little bit of the backstory.
yeah,
This is
give us
related
the
to
TLDR.
this was a response to Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson's paper. He claimed that he was able to um calculate the time to the most recent mitochondrial ancestor to about 6,000 years ago. Well, there's a little bit of a problem, and he identifies it in that paper, or I shouldn't call it a paper, it's a blog post. Nathaniel Jeanson, MTT, or mitoch, um,
Yeah, we
under,
gotta
ancestor.
link it.
I'm gonna 100% try and find the paper, but the Anthony.
The super basic version is Nathaniel Jeanson, prominent young earth creationist, came out and essentially was like, I have data that proves mitochondrial Eve lived like 6,000 years ago, and to support my claim, I'm using data from Ding et al. And this only works if Ding et al. Is, I believe it was somatic, right? Is using somatic rates.
Yeah, they were using somatic and not germline, and
Right.
he identifies that problem in his own blog post, saying, "Hey, look, if this isn't the germline, then my paper isn't valid." Well, I got bad news for Jensen because I did what he should have done, and that is I emailed Dr. Ding et al. And said, "Hey, Dr. Ding, um, what do you think of this blog post?" And he basically came out and said, um, "The problem is that's never he completely misused my paper, um, and um, that's pretty much the game right there."
It really speaks to the level of effort that we're working towards here, right? It's like I can't even imagine for my master's thesis, which was like baby mode for all this. It's like this isn't even the kind of thing that's necessarily going to get published, although I'm on that track, so we'll see. But Sunflower says, can you explain how he misused it? So Jensen was attempting to calculate a pedigree mutation rate. He used a paper by Ding et al., who was, I believe he's a geneticist, but I can't remember correctly, and effectively said, using Ding et al.'s mutation rates, which I'm going to assume are germline, we can get this number, right? This 6,000-year-old mitochondrial Eve date. In his book Replacing Darwin, he's very clear that it necessarily has to be a germline rate. And he's like, but
Yep.
we have good reason to believe that this is a germline rate because of A, B, C, D, E, right?
Yep.
The
Well,
problem is the correct course of action here is to simply email Ding himself, the head author on the paper, and say, hey, I just want to double check. Are you doing germline here? Is this the kind of work that we're going towards?
yep. And Ding would have said
But he
no.
didn't do that. He
Right.
made an
Exactly.
assumption. So David Neff here on this side, he took that step for Jensen and was he emailed Ding and was like, hey, what do you think of this? Because Jensen was kind enough to actually publish this in a blog format as well. And Ding came out and was like, oh, no, that was not the purpose of the study. You can't draw the conclusion that Jensen is drawing about these germline pedigree mutation rates using my study because that wasn't the purpose of it. It's being entirely misused. Everyone else is like going
Yep.
going
Yep.
ham in the chat.
Yep. I love this comment. Will we ever have herd immunity from COVID-19?
Oh God, I wish.
Yeah. By the way, just pointing this out, we are 37 minutes in, and we haven't even started the video. So
Yes,
many things.
we're going to continue. Okay, we're going back to the video. Hold on, I'm sharing the screen. There's just so much to talk about. Is the problem?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the sentence that we were on in the description was, this state of affairs is hard to reconcile with Darwin's idea that species evolved slowly and gradually over long periods of time. Again, it's insane to me that it's very analogous to this idea that the young earth creationists proposed, uniformitarianism. Uniformitarianism is not what's held by geologists today. Geologists today, and for the past several decades, propose an ideal known as actualism, which is general uniformitarian ideas with punctuated periods of local catastrophe. The same is true with slow, gradual change versus things like punctuated equilibrium. But of course, creationists don't care about any of this, at least in my experience. And we'll see if that comes to fruition here.
Yeah.
Darwin himself acknowledged this problem and admitted that if we assume the theory of evolution to be true, we should find an interminable, and I guess he means indeterminable, or maybe I'm incorrect here, number of intermediate forms in the fossil record. However, at Darwin's time, these countless transitional forms were nowhere to be found. I really love this idea that, like, when Darwin was alive, like, Darwin was like, hey, maybe evolution, and then everybody was like, let's pour what is effectively billions of dollars into sussing out where we can find these intermediate forms. That wasn't how paleontology was carried out then, and we still found intermediate forms that validated Darwin's theory while he was still alive, as we previously mentioned. The leading figures of paleontology didn't hold back with their criticism of Darwin, who in turn described their objections as potentially fatal to the entire theory of evolution. Yet instead of dealing with the paleontological evidence as it presented itself to him, Darwin explained away the absence of paleontological evidence for evolution by asserting that future discoveries by paleontologists would eventually unearth these countless intermediate forms that his theory needed in order to be vindicated. Have his hopes come true? No, they haven't. In fact, as the science of paleontology has, like any other scientific discipline during the 20th century, made huge leaps forward, the evidence that has emerged has put the theory of evolution into even greater trouble. Find out why in this very first episode of my new series on the basics of intelligent design. I couldn't be more excited for this.
Yeah.
I don't feel the need to
Oh,
read all this. It's
if
just Stephen Meyer shilling.
yeah. By the way, real quick, can I share my screen real quick? I
Yes,
wanted
let
to
me. Oh
share
God,
something real quick.
yeah, hold on. Let
Share
me just
screen.
hold on. I'm doing my best here. Hold on. I'm moving around.
Yeah.
Hold on. Okay. Add to stream.
List of transitional fossils. It's hard to believe how anybody could possibly claim that there's no transitional fossils when we have so much of a plethora of transitional fossils that have been discovered in the past decades. One of my personal favorites is Tiktaalik because it was found in the exact geological strata where it was predicted to be. And you can't get any more scientific than this. I predict that we are going to find this and this strata, and then you'll find this and that strata. That is very powerful evidence for evolution, and very powerful. It's a very powerful transitional form. So I don't know how anyone can possibly say that there's no transitional fossils. They're either lying or they don't know what they're talking about. And my challenge for young Earth creationists is if you still do not think that transitional species, if you argue, if you want to say that transitional fossils do not exist, then please set a goalpost. What would you accept as a transitional fossil? What would satisfy you? And
I
and I
I
think there's a misconception there that you would transitional fossils would be like half of this, half of that, like the crocodile idea that is half of this animal and half of this animal, which is entirely not what's being protected at all.
Well, this idea of moaicism, right? So we're seeing these mosaic forms whose individual portions are in and of themselves also mosaics. So, for instance, the classic example that I always give is the likes of Homo habilis or Australopithecus sediba. That would also include individuals attributed to Homo habilis who are maybe adjacent species like Homo rudolfensis or Homo gattungensis. Um, these are individuals who are mosaics in and of themselves. So, for instance, the aspects of their form, of their morphology, are mosaic in the sense that we've got upper arms that tend to be quite basal. They're a bit primitive. They're still adapted for holding upright and kind of ambling through the trees. But we also see inline big toe, bull-shaped pelvis, these ventral foramen magnum that is necessarily going to belong to a biped, so something that's walking around on 2 feet. This is a mosaic, right? This is an organism that is a mosaic. But more importantly, individual aspects of this organism are also mosaic in nature. So the femoral head might have aspects that are primitive and aspects that are derived. This is especially true for things like facial morphology. But like, I can't stress this enough. It's an eyeballing it game for the vast majority of the creationists that I've at least interacted with. It's like, this kind of looks more like an ape to me in the case of human evolution. Or this is also very true in the theropod bird transition, where they're like, to me this is like a bird. Like, ask a creationist what Archaeopteryx is. You'll get like you'll get a very interesting gradient of answers.
Right. And same way with hominidés. Some think that hominidé is ape and something that is man. They can't decide. And here's how you test to see if you have a transitional fossil. Take it to the young earth creationist and ask them, what is this? And if they can't even agree amongst themselves, that's probably a good indicator that this is truly a transitional fossil.
Well, and it can be very funny because these guys have more of an issue deciding what is ape and what is human than like the paleoanthropologists do. And the paleoanthropologists, like their bread and butter is fighting with each other. So
Yeah.
the fact that the creationists outdo them is very funny. You'll get some creationists who are like, well, it's very clear that Australopithecus afarensis, Lucy's species, whom we have 300 plus attributable specimens to, I guess I should say, Australopithecus, the genus in general. They're like, could be human. I don't know. It's like, could be an ape, could be a human. It's like, well, that's because you don't have any kind of objective criteria by which to define what is human and what is ape. And paleontologists don't either because it's such a smooth gradient. The same is true for the theropod bird transition. The same is true from your terrestrial mammal to your cetacean transition, from your eusthenopteran like lobe-finned fish all the way up to your tetrapod. Like, we could go on and on and on. It's problematic for both parties, but in the case of traditional paleontology, it's because the fossil record is flush with individual specimens to have to deal with.
Yep. And here we go. It's actually very interesting because um, Todd Charles Wood actually argues that Australopithecus sebdiva is part of the human holobaramon. So they want to say
I
that,
I love
so
Todd
that
Wood. Todd
yes,
Wood is Todd Wood is numero uno for me on like the professional creationist honesty list, because this is a guy who sits down and he's like, yeah, like a lot of our Australopithecines, like they have really mosaic features, and like their brain cases overlap quite a bit with what we see in early genus Homo. So like, I don't know, human Homo baraman, like I don't know, I guess that sounds right to me. Also, Sunflower wants to know Ding's specific paper. I don't remember it. This isn't something that I dedicated quite a bit of time, nearly as much time as you did, David. So if you want to
yeah,
pop that in the side chat when you can. And
yeah,
I think we have to get into this video.
oh
So
yeah,
I'm gonna share my screen, and we're gonna get started on this because we're 46 minutes in and we've made it through the description, which is kind of par for the course, at least in my experience. Okay, deflate. Elucidate for us the problems for evolution. Oops, I was trying to do that. Oh, good, we're gonna get some birds.
Did you know that Charles Darwin knew about the key issue in his theory that doesn't add up? Did you know that he was troubled by the fact that an entire field of scientific study opposes the key tenets of evolution? Yes, he sure was, and although he was hoping that future discoveries would fix his problem, the evidence that emerged shattered that hope into 1,000 pieces. Join me for this video to learn why Darwin was spot on in his doubts and find out what this means for the theory of evolution. Hi, my name is Lucas, and this is my apologetics channel Deflate, which challenges skeptics, strengthens believers, and creates a space for awesome discussions about God.
I'm cool with awesome discussions about God. I'm cool with challenging the paradigm. That's like the core of what science is trying to do, is sussing out truth through intense arguments pretty much nonstop. So I like that. I like the idea that I like the basic concept that he's espousing here. I just somehow doubt that it's entirely in good faith. I think that Lucas has come to the conclusion prior, and is not actually interested in doing a deep dive into what it is that Darwin said and what it is that paleontology, genetics, etc., associated fields have revealed since then. But we'll see. We'll give Lucas the benefit of the doubt. He's got a slick haircut. He's got nice glasses.
yep,
We'll give it to him for now.
yep. And just a quick fundraiser updates. So far this stream, we have raised $328.04. So thank you guys so much for your generous donation. I do have a goal of trying to get between 500 to 700 this stream, and so it looks like we're pretty almost at the halfway point of what I'm hoping to get tonight's
It's
July fundraiser donation.
it's
So
it's
we're about
super
to
sappy and like it's super sappy and lame and like cucked of me to say this, but when I was kind of thinking about hosting this, I kind of thought to myself, I was like, if there's any audience out there that's going to be willing to support the educational journey of someone, it's going to be mine.
Yes, exactly.
I really didn't have any doubt that this was going to be a goal that was going to be achievable, just because everyone in this community that I'm incredibly grateful to have helped cultivate in any way is pro education and is hoping to reach further truth and to essentially further the journey of humanity, to find out our own origins and also suss out the details of related medicine
Yep.
and zoology, etc. I'm not surprised. I'm just
Yep.
proud.
Thank you guys so much. And again, Erica, I cannot thank you enough. Zen Lizard just sent a $5 super chat. So thank you so much. I really appreciate everything
Oh, I
that you
want to
guys
read
have
that.
done.
Hold on. Okay, Zen didn't actually say anything. Sorry,
Yeah, it's
Zen.
just
But thank you for the super chat. I did hop over to try to read it.
Yep. Yeah, Zen Lizard, he said a worthy cause. Well, thank you very much. I do really appreciate you guys.
Very cool. All right, let's. Oh shoot, I'm on not even the right thing. Okay, now we're on the right thing. Let's let Lucas continue here. I like the idea. I like the core thoughts. Let's see if he backs that up.
In this video, I'm launching a new series that will introduce you into the basics of intelligent design and of critical thinking about evolution. Check out the video description and pinned comment to find out more. Let's get
Okay,
started.
so
Darwin's
real quick. It looks like this is going to be a series of videos. So I actually think it'll be kind of fun to kind of respond to these videos as they come along. I think that'll be a really fun thing to do.
I agree. I think that it's a good deal. I mean, he clearly has an audience, and while the comments that I've read are somewhat mixed, I respect what he's trying to do. If there's a good faith motivation, which there very well might be, I'm into that. I like that. There's nothing wrong with challenging the paradigm, supposing you have actual reason to do so. My doubt is that support. I think that it's going to be an interesting journey. This is part one. Some folks in the comments were like, let's wait till the whole series comes out before we pass judgment. Not in my house. We're taking this piece by piece. That's
Yep,
how we
I
gotta
agree.
do it. We're consuming it as Lucas intended. But I like it. He seems like a cool guy. We'll see where we get.
Hypothesis begins with the craft of pigeon breeding. He observed that by carefully selecting from within a given set of pigeons, specific pigeons with certain characteristics, breeders are able to create a new set of pigeons. Depending on the goal and selection of the breeder, the newly bred set of pigeons would differ in overall size, color, or size of wings from the original set.
This is going to be, I can already tell, a new information.
Yeah, I can predict either no new information or no new kinds. I'm going to predict it's either one of those two things.
I'm going to go with information because this guy he's an ID proponent. So he's not a young earth creationist. He's an individual who is very chill with conventional geology, at least as far as I can tell, because he's very much promoting Stephen Meyer in the comments and in the description.
Yeah, and quick comment, just a walking fish. God's like, Kevin, the video is stupid quiet, so is there a way for you to turn up the volume?
It's too... Okay, wait, hold on. There's gotta be... Hold on. Let's see here. If I go to this... Nope, it's just gonna let me edit the stream. Okay, I can just turn up my volume and we'll cope. The video is stupid quiet. Okay, Walker. I didn't come here to be insulted by you. All right, hold on. Okay. You tell me if this is better, Walker, the ultimate arbiter of audio quality.
Based on that, Darwin suggested that nature was vested with the same creative powers as the breeder, namely, to select those features in animals that are useful in the struggle for survival.
Yeah, it's a lot better. It's a lot better on my end. It's a lot better on my end. I'm not sure on Walker's end.
Okay, well, Walker, you let us know if we have met your needs. I want to pause too at that moment. I don't think we're off to a great start once we've actually gotten into the sort of the meat of it, begun to get into the meat of it. All the pigeon breeding stuff, that's correct. Darwin did a lot of pigeon breeding. That being said, we're already imposing agency on nature. I know and understand that natural selection sort of gives nature this agency just by the merit of the words that are being used. But I honestly think that it's important to realize that it's more of a filter than anything else, right? we're not necessarily looking at, and we definitively, I would argue, aren't looking at an individual nature sitting there and saying, I like this trait, I don't like this one. It's a filter of fitness, and fitness is, of course, determined by the context. So
Right,
the
exactly.
environment. And that
Right.
environment includes not just literal environmental factors, but also things like social factors, which are very
Right.
important to appreciate for things that are relevant to human evolution, primates, mammals in general. So assigning agency this early doesn't bode well, in my
Right.
opinion.
And of course, yeah, as you said, all mutations are context dependent. Let's say we have a fox that has a mutation that gives him white fur. Is this a good mutation or a bad mutation? Well, it depends. If you're in the Arctic and it's a snowy environment, then yeah, that's going to be a great advantage because you're going to be able to blend in with the snow and the ice around you. But if you're in the middle of a forest, if you have white fur, you're going to be sticking out like a sore thumb. So that'll be a very bad mutation to have.
Well,
So,
it's important too to appreciate the massive role in mammals in particular, but I would argue too, going back all the way to your first tetrapods and earlier, is the role that sexual selection plays. Sexual selection can be sometimes a bit arbitrary, like what we see in plumage selection in birds of paradise, or the classic peacock example, or manes in lions. The entire idea is that from a female perspective, you're looking at these very just bodacious features that an individual could only support if they were just very healthy and metabolically sound, and saying anyone who can afford to spend resources on something that obnoxious is worth breeding with to pass on my genetics. So sexual selection throws a wrench into natural selection's intuitive path, I would argue, just because preference is at play once you get any kind of cognition, and that appears decently early. We're talking what, 400 million years ago, something along those lines. So let's let Lucas continue.
This is why he said that I have called this principle by which each slight variation, if useful, is preserved by the term natural selection in order to mark its relation to man's power of selection.
So
all right. So,
that's fair, I would say. This is effectively saying we're calling it selection because it is digestible in relation to artificial selection, which is by human hands. I appreciate this,
right.
Lucas. Excellent work.
Yeah. And it's important to point out that they're actually not really relevant to this video, but that there's actually three different types of natural selection: stabilizing, directional, and disruptive. But we can get into that a little bit later. So there's not just one type of natural selection.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come up because I don't imagine that Lucas in this video is going to appreciate punctuated equilibrium, which is, of course, effectively necessary when appreciating the fossil record, because we have so many clear minor and mass extinctions that are dictated by environmental change.
And so Darwin's hypothesis in the origin of species was essentially this: starting from one common ancestor, all life forms evolved slowly and gradually over long periods of time.
Kind of right, although again, he is. I a bit resent this common trend with intelligent design advocates. They take Darwin's interpretation of the theory of evolution, which was, of course, revolutionary in and of itself, but they take it on those terms exclusively instead of appreciating what we've gleaned since then as well. Right. So slow, gradual change, while common and very important for, as you mentioned, things like slow directional selection or stabilizing selection. When we're looking at things like disruptive selection, it's in the name. That's going to occur when you've got drastic environmental change. And a great many of the biggest successions that we see in the fossil record occur because something very, very disruptive happened. So we see the likes of the Siberian or the Deccan traps rather, and the Siberian traps, really both, because we're looking at this disruption with the synapsids, allowing for the rise of the dinosaurs, and then we're also seeing an aiding in the extraterrestrial impact hypothesis with the traps again taking out the dinosaurs. So it allows for their rise and it contributes to their fall and the subsequent rise of mammals. This disruptive selection, it's so key to what we see with replacement in the fossil record. To not appreciate it is to eliminate a huge portion of paleontology and evolutionary theory, I would say.
Yep, exactly.
As random mutation would bring up new traits from which natural selection would preserve or select the ones that are useful for survival. Accordingly, his theory predicted that the gradual development of species would be reflected in the geological record with an endless array of transitional fossilized animal forms, which would allow paleontologists and biologists to trace the tiny steps biological organisms took in evolving from one species into the next.
All right,
This
stop
is-
it.
yeah.
And there are many species that are so well preserved and the fossil record is so well represented that we can actually do just that. The whale evolution, for example, is probably the most famous. We can pretty much trace their evolutionary history back to an animal. And
I would actually argue that your microscopic forms, like your planktons, your arthropods, arthropods aren't microscopic, but your smaller organisms are going to be better at preserving some of these slow gradual change, just because they tend to have larger populations, and so they tend to be more conducive to fossilization. Just because it's like darts at a board, right? There's more opportunities. But I think the important thing to appreciate here is that, again, he's not taking into account things like punctuation, right? With massive environmental impacts that are going to basically upset the natural order of things and change what is particularly fit.
right, exactly.
Yet at the same time, when he published The Origin of Species in 1859, paleontologists had bad news for him. The fossil record showed very clearly that new species appear suddenly and abruptly, and not by evolving in small step-by-step fashion.
This is completely disregarding taphonomy in general. Which forms are going to be selected for because they're more easily fossilizable, if that's even a word. I'm going to go ahead and say that it is. It's unbelievable to me that one can assess the paleontological record without taking taphonomy into account. For those of you who might not be aware, taphonomy is the study of how things die and preserve. Big things tend to preserve easier than small things, and hard things preserve easier than soft things. As you can see, this leads to a very evident bias in the fossil record. You're not going to see an easy preservation of things like jellyfish or even bats, because they're either fine-boned and have smaller populations, or they're soft-bodied. This is in comparison to things like, we've got a ton of Allosaurus, for example. We've got these guys by the truckload. We've got a lot of Edmontosaurus. We've got a lot of specific kinds of synapsid. Lystrosaurus is everywhere.
And mammoths as well.
Right. So appreciating, and I'm far less informed on sort of the plant side of things here. I'm specifically talking about animals. But to not appreciate the taphonomic bias or even discuss it is to completely undersell the situation as it is. And it doesn't bode well for continuing the video. So let's
over long
continue.
periods of time. For this reason, the most prominent paleontologists at Darwin's time rejected his theory. The issue was not that there were some minor inconsistencies here and there between Darwin's theory and the fossil record. No, it was that the science of paleontology as a whole and everything paleontologists knew presented a picture that was diametrically opposed to the one Darwin tried to paint.
I will say that at the time period, it was significant. Paleontology and the paleontologic record was significantly less supportive of evolutionary theory than it is now. So the problem, of course, is that the title of this video is Basics of Intelligent Design, Darwin's Nightmare, which to me paints a picture that this is still the case, which is objectively not true. I can, of course, speak with relation specifically to primatology and human evolution, where this is definitively not the case. We've got quite an incredible gradient of change from what we see from the common ancestor between humans and chimps to humans, but additionally between what we see in this sort of Morganocodon or Purgatorius style ancestor of mammals into primates through the adapids and omomyids, all the way up through the Cercopithecus, your Parapithecus, your Oligopithecus, etc., rather, through the New World monkeys, as well as the Old World monkeys, the Age of the Apes in the Miocene. And this isn't even an area that is like particularly conducive to fossilization. It's not horrible, it could be worse, but it's not great in these savanna-style environments, these dry woodlands. So if we've got an excellent picture in an area that is relatively average for taphonomy and preservation, what does that say about our other areas that I'm sure, I would imagine rather, that Lucas isn't going to cover, which is areas that are rather conducive to preservation, which do show this slow change over time with periods of punctuated equilibrium, or with periods of, I suppose I should say, a rapid response to the environment.
Yep, exactly.
Darwin himself was painstakingly aware of that, and he expressed his discomfort repeatedly in his book. Like here, for example, as according to the theory of natural selection, an interminable number of intermediate forms must have existed. Why is not every geological formation charged with such links?
That is fair enough to cite that from On the Origin of Species or from Darwin's early life. But again, as we discussed previously, Darwin's theory from a paleontological perspective was not vindicated until the latter half of his life, when paleontology really picked up.
Right.
I would encourage. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm gonna ramble.
Okay, yeah, sure. And as I pointed out earlier, there's a whole host of transitional fossils that have been found. And yeah, towards the second part of towards the latter part of his life, that's when paleontology really started to mature as a field. Really, before Darwin, they really didn't know what fossils were, and this is really around the time of Darwin. Is really around the time when we're starting to say together, "Hey, we have these fossils. These look like nothing we have alive today." So there must have been some time in the past where these animals, were alive, and that are no longer here. So that is one of the pretty key point, I think.
Well, and for the record as well, when Darwin was formulating The Descent of Man, it wasn't even appreciated with certainty that humans came out of Africa. There was still somewhat of a question as to whether we were dealing with something that was multi-regional or where specifically Homo sapiens in archaic or modern form came to be. So the paleontology that Darwin was working with was quite meager compared to even what would come about in the early 1900s. So I don't think that it is fair, we'll say, to assess the theory of evolution under Darwin's terms, because so much has advanced since that time period. And I think that it is, maybe from a cynical perspective, a bit strategic of Lucas to assess it from where Darwin was at, saying, well, Darwin wasn't vindicated in the early portion of his life. He was concerned about the paleontological aspects, where are all the intermediate forms. I mean, that would be like assessing relativity from like its inception and then stopping before Einstein was vindicated by subsequent discoveries.
Right.
Just to say, you're just chopping history into pieces. That's not how this works. So I don't know. I think it's I was going to say uncharitable, but I don't even think that that's an accurate way of describing what's being done here. I think there's some intentional omission going on, in my opinion.
Right.
Or here, the abrupt manner in which whole groups of species suddenly appear in certain formations has been urged by several paleontologists as a fatal objection to the belief in the transmutation of species. If numerous species have really started into life all at once, the fact would be fatal to the theory. And what was Darwin's response? I can answer these questions and objections only on the supposition that the geological record is far more imperfect than most geologists believe. Only a small portion of the world has been geologically explored.
All right,
This
stop.
is
I will.
effectively true.
Yeah, and I will say,
Speaking. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I will say, I give him mad props. Most creationists and intelligent design advocates that I've ever listened to stopped him right before the sentence, and so you get a dishonest quote mind. Um, so hold on, I do want to ask. So do I need 700 or 20,000? So yeah, $20,000 is more of a long-term goal down the line. We're trying to raise $700 today, and we're about halfway there, so we're almost at $350. That's a great question. So thank you, African, for that question. So I just wanted to make sure I answered that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I wanted to,
once again, you can find David's links rather in the description. He is again trying to essentially fund his undergraduate education, which, to stress once again, this channel is of course always first and foremost an educational channel and is in full support of. David's a friend of the channel. He's come on several times. I've been over on his channel, and I would hate to see him miss out on undergraduate education for what is, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively small barrier of entry, which is why we're doing the fundraiser. So that's
Yep.
we're dunking on Lucas here of the Deflate channel to raise money for David. So,
Yep.
Shall we continue?
We shall indeed continue.
Let's do it.
So Darwin asserted that paleontologists simply hadn't unearthed yet the interminable number of intermediate forms his theory predicted to exist, hoping that the future of paleontology would change that and vindicate him. In other words, he was essentially making an argument from silence and explained away the absence of evidence instead of explaining the evidence scientists were actually facing.
I don't think that that's fair. I don't think that that's a fair assessment here. I think that, again, Lucas isn't appreciating the first of all, the emergence of paleontology when Darwin was alive, but additionally, Darwin is discussing something of an ideal here. So he's saying that if the entire geologic column was preserved, effectively, covering things as they lay dying and preserving them for future view for individuals like us today, we should see this slow, gradual change over time in every single lineage. Period. Full stop. Obviously, that's not the case. And I don't imagine, in fact, I would imagine that I could support this looking through Darwin's works. Darwin didn't think that either. He's comparing an ideal to a reality here, which is precisely why Darwin knew he was vindicated at the end of his life, because they were already with a newborn focus on paleontology, digging up these transitional forms that are, at least in the case of Archaeopteryx lithographica, relatively smack dab in the middle of what we're looking at with your classic theropod versus your modern bird.
Yep, and Farron Salas, I wanted to answer this question. Is the donation via Super Chat or other link?
Yeah.
So the preference would be to donate through either my GoFundMe, PayPal, or Venmo, but all Super Chats are going to be going to me as well. So I guess your pick.
Yeah, I wanted to, sorry, I'm swapping around here because I'm trying to keep track of the chat, but because I'm sharing my screen, I'm a bit chained to Lucas here. Yes, the links in the description are going to be the best way that you can donate to David and help him start school here in the fall. Super chats, though, I will be funneling those towards David, but you are providing me extra work, so I'm coming after you. I will find you and I will politely chastise you. Okay, Lucas, we're so close to halfway done.
That is, the fact of new animal forms showing up suddenly and abruptly in the fossil record rather than gradually. Had you lived at the time of Darwin and were excited about his theory, you might have joined him in hoping that those innumerable intermediate forms in the fossil record would be unearthed later on.
I imagine here, as a brief aside, I'll be super quick, what Lucas is going to do here is he's going to ignore the intermediate forms that we see from effectively the Cambrian period onward, and he is going to focus on this quote-unquote sudden appearance of forms at the Cambrian, and I very much doubt we're going to see our old friend Icaria Wariusia appearing in David's video here. That would be my prediction, if you will.
Yep. And I just do want to.
Untrue? No.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I do also want to point out that, as you were saying earlier, so many things just do not fossilize well. What we are probably seeing in the fossil record, we are lucky to have the fossils that we do have. That probably represents less than 1/10 of 1% of all life forms that ever existed on Earth, and so many that we just will never know about just because they didn't fossilize.
To touch on that point as well, it is, in my opinion, important to appreciate here that that what we're looking at from Lucas's perspective, right, is we're backing it all the way up to the Cambrian, and we're saying, look at this sudden appearance of life forms. So what does that get an intelligent design proponent to, like Lucas? It gets you to the Cambrian. Like, even if we were to grant that Icaria doesn't exist and other Ediacaran forms are just completely scrubbed from the record, we've never discovered them, whatever, that gets you to the Cambrian. So what that would suggest is that we're looking at like a phylum level evolutionary orchard, if you will, some kind of merging of the creation orchard that young Earth creationists tend to propose and the joined tree of life to Luca, effectively, that evolutionary conventional scientists tend to propose. So I don't understand why this is such an. To me, it's very interesting that this is a sticking point. It's the Cambrian explosion, and I had a conversation with Gunter Beckley, and judging by Lucas's accent, I'm curious as to see if he might be a colleague or a friend of Gunter Beckley, who I very much enjoyed my conversation with on Theology Unleashed. But Gunter kind of made the same argument, and he's done so on his blog as well, which is that all the Ediacaran organisms that we see, it's all effectively a mistake, right? What we're seeing is geologic phenomena or the colonization kind of impact of microorganisms. They're not actually the origin of bilaterians or animals or plants or whatever. Or it wouldn't be plants, but of other multicellular large clades. Which again, it leads me to the question, like, why is this the sticking point? You're basically accepting evolution from chordata, right, or bilateria forwards, but you're drawing the line in a very strange place. And to me, it seems like a kind of arbitrary sticking point for intelligent design proponents to take.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
No, on the contrary, the fossil evidence that has surfaced has made Darwin's problem much more severe, as we're about to see. In the year 1909, Charles Doolittle Walcott, then director of the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., discovered the Burgess Shale in British Columbia, Canada, which until today is considered one of the most important finds in the history of paleontology. Walcott's team collected more than 65,000 animal fossils, many of which were remarkably well preserved, belonging to a variety of different phyla. Now, here's an important term you want to wrap your head around. Phyla. What is that? Borrowing Stephen Meyer's definition, the term phyla, singular phylum, refers to divisions in the biological classification system. The phyla constitute the highest or widest categories of biological classification in the animal kingdom, with each exhibiting a unique architecture, organizational blueprint, or structural body.
Why did they pick this picture for Dr. Meyer? Why would they pick this? He looks like he's been shot in the abdomen. Like, there's so many pictures of Dr. Meyer out there that you could have picked. This is the one they chose. This is a correct assessment by Dr. Meyer. But again, I have to question, why is it so arbitrary? Why are we beginning the intelligent design sort of dogma here at the phyla level within kingdoms? I don't know. I don't have the answer. And I don't suspect I'll receive one because, again, we're not going to be discussing any kind of Ediacaran fauna. To emphasize, the paper that we very briefly looked at the abstract for on Icaria from 2020, this potential origin of bilateria. This is not the only Ediacaran fauna or flora, for that matter, that we have. Ediacaran is relatively rich with organisms. So my question would be, okay, like what are we going to cover here? What is Lucas going to accept as life from the Precambrian? I don't know. We'll find out. But they should have picked a different picture, that's for sure. Poor Dr. Meyer. I'd be kind of pissed, honestly. David, would you like to say anything else before we continue?
No, but I guess I'll just give a quick fundraiser donation.
Yes.
Update. So right now we are at $477.64. Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for your generous donation. We are only like $23 away from our goal of $500, and we have a goal of doing $500 to $700 tonight. So
again,
I'm definitely.
No,
I'm
sorry.
hoping we can get closer to 700. Of course, we are only less than $30 away from 500 and $222 away from 700. So we are more than halfway through our goal.
This money again goes directly to funding David's education. So this is going for paying for very basic fees for the orientation and sort of situation in the fall for preparing for classes to begin in early September. So it sucks that there are orientation fees. It sucks that minimum wage jobs are incapable largely of supporting someone who's trying to get a further education. That's why we're doing this, because to emphasize for like the third or fourth time, this is a channel that prioritizes education over everything else. Knowledge for knowledge's sake is important, and David in particular is going with the goal of becoming an expert in virology, which, if anything about the past 2 years, I suppose I would say, has taught us, we need our virologists. So.
Yep. And I've always really enjoyed studying infectious diseases and public health. Direwolf 96A just donated $23 Canadian, so we're pretty much right at $500 almost.
That means we've reached the minimum goal. And
yeah, we've
again, I've got to hype up the Poggers audience that I have, and again emphasize that this isn't surprise, it's pride. I obviously, if any audience out there was going to help someone along with their education, it was going to be mine. Maybe that's a little hyperbolic. There's probably a lot of channels out there that would support David's journey or journeys that are analogous. I mean, hosting something like this is a piece of cake, because I can trust that my audience and I have very similar goals, which is to educate people. And that includes helping raise the funds when someone has been kind of hosed by the bureaucracy of academia, unfortunately, or things like minimum wage that can act as a barrier of entry.
Yeah.
But as much of a bummer as that kind of thing is, let's let Lucas continue, because we're so close to being at the halfway point of this video. We're so close.
Plants. Here are 3 examples of 3 different phyla. The phylum of the arthropods includes all insects, all spiders, all types of crabs, lobster, as well as animals such as the trilobites. The phylum of the cnidarians includes corals, jellyfish, and sea anemones, and the phylum of the chordates includes, among other animals, all birds, all reptiles, all fish, and all mammals. In each of these phyla, all the animals, as different as they may look from each other, are united by their organizational structure, which is also the very thing that allows us to differentiate between all the phyla. The animal kingdom is usually organized into 35 different phyla, and the known fossil record features animals representing about 27 of those 35 phyla.
That statement on organization, as a very small sticking point, I would argue that Arthropoda or Panarthropoda, depending on how he wants to use it, because Arthropoda can get kind of dicey, they're also bilaterally symmetric. So we're looking at radial symmetry for the cnidarians and bilateral symmetry for your chordates and for your arthropods. So I mean, I'm guessing he's just imagining, like, from looking at metamerism and like specifically how many limbs they have, I suppose. But that's an interesting sticking point again, because we see variety within the arthropods and we see variety within the chordates of of body plan, effectively. So
Exactly.
I don't know. Again, it feels arbitrary to me, is my sticking point, I guess. But let's let him continue to throw numbers at us.
Of the 27 phyla featured in the fossil record, 20 make their first and sudden appearance within one single geological time period called the Cambrian era, without evidence of fossilized forms in older strata, which could be considered their evolutionary precursors.
As a quick note, it's interesting that we're not getting into the specifics of that. Which in particular see no precursors. That being said, even if we didn't, I wouldn't particularly find that all that surprising, if you will. Just because when evolution is acting on a brand new body plan that is particularly advantageous, or a new form of armor, or a new sensory apparatus, it tends to happen pretty quickly. It's almost analogous to what we see after natural disasters,
Right.
like the never.
Yeah. Dire Wolf, 96A, how much do you want to bet that he's going to reference Douglas Axe and his proteins arguments? I'm not familiar with that argument.
It depends, because since this is a series, we might get into the minutia of that in a later video, because this is essentially meant to be like, look how dumb Darwin is. Like, this is like the introductory video to this series. You can tell by how skeptical he looks over here in this thumbnail. Poor Lucas is unhappy with the current situation, and poor Darwin, he's admitting he has no evidence.
Yeah. And,
so I don't know. I think that's a fair bet to make, but I would hesitate to say that you'll see it in this video. You might, but you also might get it in a later video, because Lucas here is determined to give us a series, which is great.
And Justin Walking Fish commented really good. The Cambrian explosion lasted 50 million years. Phyla are arbitrary. Not all phyla appeared, and most animals were still similar to each other. And I think Aaron Robb pointed out in one of his videos that there were many phylas that were completely extinct by the time you even get to the Cambrian. And I think he pointed out that like only 1/3 of all phyla actually came from the Cambrian. I think something like that.
Well, the Ediacaran and the Cambrian are both like they're like nature's deviant art phase. Like, we're seeing a lot of very weird body forms. We're seeing a lot of experimentation, if you will, where certain body plans might be selected over others, but once you get kind of the epitome of efficiency, they eventually get wiped out, like in the likes of Opabinia or Hallucinogenia, species that aren't cool and very interesting, but long-term aren't sustainable for lineages. So I think that's totally correct. I mean, Walker's absolutely right on that. I trust Walker's opinion, of course. I think, too, that just when we're looking at the Ediacaran and the Cambrian, I mean, this is a very particular snapshot of life. So again, it feels arbitrary to me from an intelligent design perspective, because all that's saying is that God, or the intelligent designer, popped a bunch of different phyla into existence at the Cambrian and then kind of went hands off, which is fine. I mean, conceptually, I don't mind that. It's just I don't think that that's supported by the data points that we see, given the biota that we see in the Ediacaran, and even a bit earlier. So, thoughts? Let's continue. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, David. Give your thoughts. I said thoughts as an invitation, but go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. So I suppose a quick update for the fundraiser. This does not include the super chats. $574.44. Is there a way to for you to see exactly how many super chats we have today, just so we can add up and see the exact total?
Maybe. Let me check. Hold on. Let me stop with the sharing. I know we all love looking at Lucas. I love it, but we're gonna have to square him out here for just a second.
I must say that I like Lucas so far. I might actually send him an email and invite him to have a conversation with me, and send him a reply.
I'll have to check at the end as far as the total for the super chats, but I believe we've had like 4 or 5, and if memory serves, it's approximately like $50.
Yeah. So right now,
Yeah.
we are pretty much at, once you count the super chats and all, I'll be like only $100, $150 away from the $700 goal. So
I mean, I would love to again take this opportunity to brag on my audience as being super based and epic. I know
yep.
Immutable is sensitive to this kind of language, but they are also very poggers, of course. Walker's correct. It would be great to get Jackson Wheat in here to really rage against the Cambrian explosion because he loves this particular point. Our friend Jackson Wheat, you guys all know him. You love him. Did we lose David Neff? We lost Neff. He'll be back in here in a second. But yes, Jackson in particular would be miffed at the least by what we're seeing from our friend Lucas here. Okay, Neff's back. We
Yep.
lost you for a second, but don't worry, I held down the fort.
That's good. Yeah, sorry, I just hit the back button by accident.
No, I know how that goes. I repel the technology, so let me get back to the sharing because I've gotta know how this ends. I gotta know how Lucas is really finishing it off here with our Cambrian explosion.
The Cambrian era is generally held to span from around 540 million years ago to around 490 million years ago.
Credit for approximately the right date range.
However,
Yep.
time
And,
in which the 20 Cambrian fire.
Sorry.
So yeah, that's about a total period of like 55 million years total. So props to him for getting that right. And so 20 new phyla within 10 million years.
I really can't blame him for taking the perspective of this argument from incredulity, right? I mean, it's not entirely unfounded just because it is technically an argument, right? It's just really rooted in emotion. It's like, oh, well, I can't square this within my own personal framework, so to me it seems quite unlikely. But I think that underplays the individuals who are actually at work here in the strata, the range of strata that we're looking at, and also, and this is probably going to be talked about later, as in later in Lucas's video series here in Deflate's video series, but the genetic change that has to occur to relate to a specific type of your sort of morphologic change, it isn't a one-to-one, right? Your genotype and your phenotype, while related, it isn't necessarily going to be one-to-one. So the classic example that I always use is brain size in primates, right? So all primates have RGAP11A, which is a gene that relates to stem cells and neuronal development. If you apply RGAP11B, which is only one single partial duplication of RGAP11A, which all primates have, RGAP11B is exclusive to anatomically modern Homo sapiens, you get a threefold increase in brain volume. That's huge, and it's such a small change. When I talked to Gunter Beckley about this, he and I agreed on this as well. He's an ID proponent who I suspect might have some connections with Lucas here just because they kind of sound like they're from the same area of the world. Maybe that's stereotyping Europeans. I don't know. But we agreed on this idea that some genotypic change is going to be very small and is going to result in very large phenotypic change. I think this is especially the case when it comes to body plan tweaking at the beginning of these kind of typical plans that we see, right?
Yep. Justin Walkenfish, interesting comment. One of the worst things that Gould ever did was overhype the phyla point in the Cambrian explosion. I legit think that inspired ID people like Myers.
Well, again, I'm drawing the connection. It's like it's all about science communication here. Right. The Cambrian explosion inspired the ID proponents in the same way that mitochondrial leave inspired also the ID proponents, but as well as the unearthed creationists. The language that scientists use when they're actually trying to communicate the results of a finding to the public, you have to be really careful.
Right.
And that's unfortunately how it is.
Right, and especially we see in the media, you might say one thing in your science paper, but the media says the exact opposite from what you said. And we see this playing out right now in the COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately, because the reporting recently has been just god awful.
It's
Higher
true.
Wolf. Does Stephen Meyer accept on old Earth? I heard that he does, but never heard him say it.
Yes,
Um,
he is in. So most ID proponents, emphasis on most, are going to accept the age of the Earth. So they tend to be supporters of this almost God the Tinkerer. So God comes in and tweaks in this progressive creation that shows up in what we see in the fossil record.
right. And of course, there's different variations um, depending on who you're talking to. I heard some say that God just started life and that was it. Others I've heard say that God guided the process of evolution. So it really all depends on um, who you ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the stance of me personally, and thus of the channel Guts at Gibbon, tends to be like, if you can't differentiate it from evolution, we're probably good. I mean, you can call it whatever you want, but if there is no means by which you can methodologically separate it from just natural selection acting on mutation, we're effectively talking about the same thing. So,
Right.
and that's me personally. So I don't claim to speak for David on that, but
Yeah.
that tends to be where I stand. All right, Lucas, take us away.
Show up is far smaller and has been calculated to cover no more than 10 million years. In fact, an MIT geochronologist has calculated that at least 16 completely new phyla appear within no more than 6 million years of the Cambrian era. 16 fundamentally different body plans within 6 million years. That's a lot of anatomical innovation within a mere blink of an eye on an evolutionary timescale.
And he's right. And in a way, in a way, he is semi-correct that this is a lot in a short geological period. So, in a way, he does have that point. But I think ultimately it comes down to incredulity.
It does, but I would also push back on this idea that this is particularly revolutionary given the time period. This idea of the law of monophyly has a lot to do with specification. So really early on, when we're dealing with this evolution of brand new body plans, we're dealing with an impressive amount of selection and selective variety on an impressive amount of very similar body plans with small tweaks that become quite different from one another. The more deep that you get into the modern era, the more distal you get to the branches on the tree of life, the harder it becomes to kind of tweak the existing genome and receive large scale change. I think that that's a fair statement to say. So while he's correct that we're seeing this emergence of just an incredible amount of phyla, given the time period and the fact that phyla is indeed a human imposition on the natural gradient of biology, I just don't think that it's all that impressive. If you're going to take the ID stance, I think your best bet is going to be moving it quite a bit backwards into either abiogenesis or the prokaryotic to eukaryotic transition, because we're looking at very simple life dominating the planet for billions with a B years.
Yep. And sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
So Tiktaalik in the comment section at Luca, really hope this becomes a series. Luca, let's try to get to 2000. Let's hope this becomes a series. And yeah, since I'll propose this to you and you can say yay or nay, it looks like that this video is going to be a part of a series of videos. So I think it'll be cool if you and I do a series of videos responding to a series of videos.
I'm more than happy to be a reactionary to what Lucas is presenting, because I and this is an inkling because very little of the series has come out, but I have an inkling that it's going to be quite a bit of a rehash of what we see from the likes of Stephen Meyer and Michael Behe, and there's not a lot that covers the specifics of that here on YouTube, which I think is important. I mean, the whole reason we picked this video is because I got a specific comment on Twitter that was like, "Hey, can you guys cover this video?" Which of course, I mean that's what we do here. And a lot of it has to do with like foundational misunderstandings of where the literature is going. I would imagine that Lucas here is working with the literature from like, it's got to be like 2005 or earlier, which is fine. He says here in the comments, to be clear, he's not claiming to be an expert where he's not. I have not received any formal training in evolutionary biology. I've spent a great amount studying neo-Darwinism and intelligent design, and then he kind of moves onward from there. So I don't think he's intentionally trying to be deceptive from like a malicious standpoint. That being said, it is the duty of individuals who have even a little bit of a background in this to kind of step up and say, hey, I don't know that this is entirely a correct representation of where the literature is at. And I think that David and I are fair in saying that so far of the 7 minutes, 16 seconds of a 12-minute, 6-second video, we've not seen an appreciation of where we've come from like 2005 to now.
Right.
With regard to this, oh wow, look at the sudden appearance of all these phyla during the Cambrian. Honey, you got to move back a little further because there's been quite a bit of work in the Ediacaran since then.
Right, exactly. And so far, I feel like it's a lot of stuff that's just simply out of date, and I don't think he's really considered all of the new information and the new stuff that we have learned just in the past decade alone.
Yeah, it's and that's not atypical. I mean, I wouldn't fault an individual who I met on the street for being a bit out of date on their origin of life research or their Cambrian explosion research for that matter. But that being said, there's a difference between being an individual you meet on the street and someone who's explicitly come out and making a series on here's how Darwinism is bad, and evolution can't account for the suite of life that we see today, and here's why intelligent design is good. I think it's your duty as an individual to be up to date on the literature if you're going to speak on it. There's a reason why I don't go around talking about physics or chemistry. It's because I know very little about it outside of my undergraduate education.
Yeah, physics. Yep, leave the physics and astrophysics stuff to Leophilius. He's the guy with that.
Yeah, I mean, Leo knows quite a bit about it. He's certainly well self-taught, but I would say too, like, leave it to the astrophysicists. It's like, I'm not going to come out and talk about dark matter. I don't know anything about dark matter. My understanding of that is very limited to what I learned in undergraduate education, which is why we mostly talk about monkeys on this channel.
Yep.
Okay, let's let him continue. Oh, we're so close.
In fact, if we compress the history of life on Earth, which began around 3.5 billion years ago, into a 24-hour day, those 6 million years would make up no more than 75 seconds.
True and
base. Within this tiny time window of 6 million years, the Trilobite, that icon of paleontology, shows up. A creature with a rather complex body plan that is divided into 3 parts: a head, chest, and tail. It's got 3 longitudinal lobes across the head, while the chest and tail consist of around 30 segments. However, probably the most impressive anatomical fact about trilobites are their lens-focusing compound eyes, which allow for a 360-degree field of vision.
I love this picture. This was clearly done in something like Blender. It's very cute. I would put a sticker of this on my computer or wear a t-shirt of this on my body. That being said, simplifying trilobite evolution to what we've seen here does a great disservice to the arthropod experts, I guess you would say, who have done quite a bit of work on the evolutionary biology and emergence of hard-bodied arthropods like trilobites, but even earlier going to panarthropoda, things like lobopods, etc.
Yep.
I don't think it's wrong to exclude the lobopods from this.
Yep, and Direwolf, this is a great comment also. If they wanted to pass Darwin for being wrong, why not harp on the fact that his model of pangenesis was wrong? So yeah, Darwin did actually get things wrong during his lifetime. Pangenesis was one of them. And of course, we now know a lot more about Mendelian inheritance and all of that type of stuff as well. So yeah, there are things that Darwin blatantly got wrong.
Well, I think too it's important to appreciate that this is not at all uncommon for Renaissance minds and later, like Darwin, Newton, Galileo, going really far back. I mean, we have to appreciate that Newton was also a huge like alchemist. Like he was very into alchemy. He was into numerology. It's like the weird fringe aspects of Newton's career does not and should not subtract from the massive contributions to science that he gave with Principia of Mathematics. And the same goes to Darwin. I mean, he got stuff wrong. He
Yeah.
lived like
By the way,
200 years ago. Yes.
I actually
Yes.
do want to share this image real quick, if you don't mind. This is actually courtesy of Dr. Dan, who is a very good
Oh,
friend of
no.
mine and a good friend of the channel. Share screen window. Let's see here, right here. This is made by Dr. Dan, aka Creation Myths,
Yes.
and this is just this really shows you exactly how far we've came since Darwinism. You have variation, inheritance, natural selection, and then you have the modern sentences going into genetics, mutation, population genetics, speciation, and paleontology. And then you have the integrated synthesis, neutral theory, evo devo, plasticity, genomics, multi-level selection, epigenetics, evolvability, all of this stuff. We've came so much further since Darwin. Um, Darwin,
And to discuss, I'm going to leave this to you, David, because I have to pee really quick. So I'm going to take a biology break here momentarily. But touch a bit more on that as well as to when we see ID proponents and creationists in particular who are actually tackling the genetic aspect, the paleontologic aspect of sort of modern science. Where exactly are they drawing that line? Because I take the opinion that it's very typically prior to the modern synthesis.
right.
Go ahead.
So yeah, it's just really incredible just how far we've came in our understanding of evolutionary biology and population genetics and evolution since Darwin. Um, really, we kind of left Darwin in the dust, so to speak, just because of how much we've learned. Um, so, quick fundraiser update while she is going. She'll be back in a few minutes. Donations so far 574.44, not counting the super chats, and I think the super chats will probably be about 20 $25. So far, it looks like we are about $600 total in this evening's fundraiser. So I am just probably less than $100 away from my um, ambitious $700 goal. And so please feel free to, if we could get one person to be generous and donate $100, or maybe two people to donate $50, we would be we would meet our goal of $700.
I'm seeing a comment as well from Walker in the side chat who says creationist tackling genetics. LOL. Where? I'm gonna actually push back on Walker there. Technically, tackling genetics incorrectly is still tackling genetics. So I mean, they do that a lot. They tackle genetics. They do it poorly. We got to give them credit where credit is due.
Yep, Dapper Dino in the house. Good to see you, my friend.
Dapper,
Trying to
good
catch
to
up.
see you here. All right, I'm adding myself back to the stream, and we're gonna let Lucas continue here.
That's a brief sketch of the animal most of us probably associate with the word fossil, and it's this animal that arguably exemplifies the paleontological challenge to evolution best. For if Darwin's theory holds true, how did complex animal forms such as the trilobite show up suddenly within a mere 6 million years with zero evidence of a precursor from which it supposedly evolved?
That, I would argue, is just incorrect as evidenced by the some hour 45-minute conversation that David and I had prior to this.
Walcott's phenomenal find in the Burgess Shale in 1909 was a major key that helped paleontologists gain such a detailed understanding of how animals showed up on the stage of life.
Arguing that the Burgess Shale supports intelligent design because it was discovered in like 1979 and seems to show this very sudden, almost de novo appearance of animal forms, that's really silly to me. It betrays an utter lack of investigation subsequent to 1979. which again, if you're going to make a video series about it, I would personally take the stance that it is your responsibility to do. I try my best, at least on my channel, I can only speak for myself here, to not talk about subjects that I know absolutely nothing about unless I've got my proper sourcing to support what it is that I'm saying, or I've got like some super awesome based in epic expert who is also on the panel.
Right. And that's like 40 years out of date. And Jorge, Burgess Shale, one of like 3 outcrops creationists know.
Yeah, that's true too. I mean, and that's not to downplay the importance of the, and I've always called it the Burgess Shale, but maybe I'm incorrect on that. Maybe Lucas knows more than I do on that subject. I don't specialize in that area. But that being said, yeah, they really like the Burgess Shale, and that's because there is so much literature about that location rather, from the 1970s, late 1970s, early 1980s, that tends to be like, wow, look at all this sudden emergence of forms. Boy, isn't that curious? And it's like, yeah, it would be. It's 40 years ago. Yeah, I would imagine that it does seem quite curious. We've not found several of the body plans or individual organisms from the Ediacaran or earlier, so I would imagine it does seem quite curious. But I don't know, maybe Lucas will surprise us, and in the last 3 minutes and 30 seconds, we'll get a really cool, awesome, well-informed, spectacular assessment of the work that's been done since 1979. So let's let him go.
But it's important to point out that in the 100 plus years that have passed since then, paleontologists have consistently encountered the exact same picture around the world when making new discoveries. A wide variety of animals whose fundamental body plans are as different from one another as that of a jellyfish and a dragonfly make their sudden appearance all at once within a tiny window of time that briefly opened around 540 million years ago. This phenomenon has come to be referred to as the Cambrian explosion.
That's a super, super outdated term for that period of time. But I don't know what else I was expecting. I know it's a meme, but I've yet to be sufficiently kind of disproven on supporting the meme of like, yeah, if you've got a creationist, whether they're young Earth or intelligent design, they tend to be approximately 20 to 30 years out of date on their terminology and their references. That seems to be the case here. Obviously, of course, there are exceptions. There are really well-informed intelligent design advocates out there. I just don't think Dr. Meyer or Lucas here are one of them. That's my personal opinion and the opinion of the Gutsick Gibbon channel and channel conglomerate. I can't speak for David Neff.
Yeah.
All right, Lucas, take us away.
Remember that Darwin admitted that the abrupt manner in which whole groups of species suddenly appear in certain geological formations was a potentially fatal objection to his entire theory. Also remember that he could answer these questions and objections only on the supposition that the geological record is far more imperfect than most geologists believe.
Both of those things are true, though.
Yeah,
One,
exactly.
of course, the geologic column is imperfect. That's accepted by everyone, including the bottom of the barrel YouTube creationists that David and I encounter commonly.
Yeah, and just to point out, yeah, I will say again, mad props to Lucas. Many younger creationists and creationists in general do not like this quote, so they just cut him off and make him look like he said something that he actually didn't say. But here's the thing: if you want to argue against Darwin, if you want to argue against this point, then you need to show that either that the geological record is pretty much perfect, you would pretty much have to show that his statement here is wrong. We know that the geological record is very imperfect, and pretty much I would argue that probably less than 0.1% of all life forms on Earth has been known to the fossil record. There are probably organisms that we can never even imagine that existed on Earth, but because they never fossilized, we just simply won't ever know about them.
I want to make something a bit clearer, just in case I don't want to allow for potential misinterpretation here. The geologic column is very imperfect. It's very spotty. Taphonomically speaking, it is it's scattershot, if you will. But that being said, we can still predict trends within the fossil record, and that can help us identify areas by which we can effectively make a prediction based on evolutionary theory, and then search in that area and potentially find a transitional form or just a useful specimen. And this is the case. Again, I can speak most authoritatively, quote unquote, in this area, but with human evolution and with primatology. Yes, the fossil record is inherently going to be incomplete, but the record that we have with regard, again, I'm only speaking about human evolution here, it's quite good, all things considered. So you can simultaneously hold the opinion that, taphonomically speaking, the fossil record is going to be definitionally here incomplete, and that certain aspects of the fossil record are remarkably well filled in. Those two things are
Yep.
not going to be mutually exclusive.
Yep. And a quick fundraiser updates. So far, just on GoFundMe right now, we have raised a total of $646.96. And I'm very thankful to every one of you who have donated. I really appreciate your support. And Erica, I cannot thank you enough for doing this for me. You have been very generous. And that
David,
does not.
it's my pleasure.
Yeah.
I
And
couldn't be happier than to. This is precisely the kind of cause that I am more than happy to support. I think,
Yep.
and again, this is something that I hope people will reach out to me if they feel they need something analogous, because this is something that
Right.
that this is why I'm here, right? It's the purpose is education, and that includes both educational videos, but also lifting up individuals who are seeking that further education. So.
Right. And that does not, of course, count the amount of super chats that we got. And I think it was about $25-ish, something around that, maybe 25 to 30. Let's just say 25. That means we had raised about $671. 700 minus. So we're literally less than $30, less than $35 away from my $700 goal. So
For those of you who might be wondering, my kazoo is just out of frame. So once we get there, the kazoo's coming out. Whether you like it or not, the kazoo is coming out once we reach the goal. So, and we've got approximately 2 minutes and 30 seconds to reach it as far as like actual video. So please, Lucas, take us away. Tell us why we're wrong. And I'm hoping that in this last 2 minutes and 30 seconds, approximately, we're going to get a very in-depth discussion of the Ediacaran fauna and biota in general.
As he asserted that only a small portion of the world has been geologically explored. But if the Darwinian argument from silence was already problematic back in 1859, it has become utterly untenable today. The science of paleontology has, like any other scientific discipline, made huge leaps in the past century.
Yeah, and he is right. He is 100% right that we have made huge progress in our understanding of paleontology and in the geological record. It's important to note that, from what I understand, I think we're discovering something like one new dinosaur per week, something along that line. One new dinosaur per week, something like that.
No. You're correct on that, because I've made that same claim in videos and like actively looked it up during recording as well. You're right.
Right.
It's approximately one new dinosaur per week. And that's, of course, again, using taphonomic bias. So these are larger animals, larger organisms that are going to be more likely to preserve given their morphology, right? So it's always what we have in the paleontologic record is always necessarily going to be a smaller portion of what actually lived. But I mean, again, it almost seems a bit paradoxical here for Lucas to effectively say, look how far we've come, paleontologically speaking, and yet Darwin's theory is still, bunk, it's still bad. you sure would think that that would be something that he would really want to sink his teeth into and get into precisely why Darwin's theory is bugged despite all these decades of paleontology. This would be the period by which, if I were an intelligent design advocate, and if I were indeed correct and had the data to support me, I would be saying, look, we've got nothing in the Ediacaran. We've got nothing earlier. It's just all very sudden, very de novo in the Cambrian. And look at all this data, look at all these papers, look at all these studies that support me. But he can't say that, which is why he doesn't, because we do indeed have a decent, a generous influx of work that's been done in the Ediacaran with biota that does indeed have through lines to Cambrian organisms. Which is why he doesn't make the claims that I just suggested I would make if I were in his position and also right. So,
Right, exactly.
Go, Lucas, take us away.
And there is no escaping the fact that what we're confronted with when we look at the fossil record is an explosion of animal forms within virtually no time at all, while the interminable number of intermediate forms with which every geological formation is supposed to be charged continue to be conspicuously absent. Yet, that's not even the half of it when you consider that some of the fossils that have been discovered after Darwin by Walcott and others exhibit body plans that weren't even known when The Origin of Species was published. This means that while Darwin had every reason to be troubled by the fact that the fossil record was hanging like a Damocles sword over his theory, far weightier reasons for even greater Darwinian anxiety have now been added, and here is why. It's not just that the interminable number of intermediate forms of the animals known to Darwin have not been found. Instead, what has been found are entirely new animal forms exhibiting body plans and anatomical structures which Darwin didn't even know to exist, and they too appear suddenly and without any precursory forms preceding them in the fossil record.
So he's referring to organisms that are indeed quite strange, the likes of Obobinia, the likes of Hallucinogenia, and others, Morella, Anomalocaris. But the thing is that, again, and I can't stress this enough, this doesn't take into account the 2 decades plus work that's been done with Ediacaran fauna. Now, the very nature of evolution that Darwin indeed proposed and that has been developed since its inception has been this idea of, under the correct circumstances, certain body plans are going to be selected for given those environmental conditions, right? No more is this true, or rather, no more evidently is this true than in the Ediacaran, in the Cambrian, when life was first reaching its inception. It was first creating these new body plans and effectively innovating, which is why we don't see really ineffective, really inefficient body plans like Hallucinogenia, like Opobinia anymore, because they weren't selected for because they didn't have a fitness advantage over the other forms that were also arising at that time. This is, again, really, really suspiciously analogous to what we see when you have a massive environmental upset like the KPG or the Permian that results in a huge wipeout of a bunch of different niches, which is very, again, I'm drawing the comparison of origin of life, a bunch of open niches, to mass extinction, a bunch of open niches. And what we see is experimentation and fixation. So,
and since the quote on the screen, without any preceding forms making the claim that no transitional forms exist, allow me to share my screen real quick one more time of a nice list of all the transitional fossils. List of transitional fossils, and here we go.
Origami Swami says as well, is this guy arguing against the validity of evolution in general, or just in the case of the Cambrian? Even if he's right about everything he said, that doesn't mean evolution is wrong. We discussed this a bit earlier. That's completely a correct statement, Origami Swami. At the very most, what Lucas is doing here is he is truncating the tree of life at the Cambrian explosion. And that's a hell of a lot of evolution that still has to occur, because he is very clearly an old Earth creationist at the very least. So you are indeed correct on that statement, Origami Swami. Also, Orge says, "Oh Christ, Erica, are you debating Mr. Batman again?" This is my first time debating Mr. Batman. I'm not looking forward to it. If I got to be completely honest, I did say this to James as well. I was like, do it.
Yeah, hey, that's a given. Quickly, this debate is not going to be about Noah's Ark. It's going to be about, hey, where did the laws of logic come from? Where did all of this come from? How do you know this? How do you know that? This is pretty much Mr. Batman's game plan.
Yeah, I told James too. I was like, listen, at the third mention, we're doing the baseball rules, right? It's like at the third mention of morals or laws of logic, we go to Q&A, because it's just a waste of time for both me and Mr. Batman, and everybody who's watching. So I don't know. Maybe he'll surprise me. Maybe we'll get a really fun, really excellent conversation about issues with the global flood, like the heat problem and the radiation issue and post-flood speciation, the kinds, how we're fitting them all on the ark, how are we feeding all of them? There's a lot to talk about. I don't suspect we're going to get any of that, but we might. So I'm remaining intensely optimistic. But we're so close. We're finishing this. It's time. We're going to finish this video.
Yep. In other words, the very problem whose lethal potential Darwin admitted to has not just not been solved by paleontology as Darwin had hoped. Instead, it has become multiple times more serious as the modern science of paleontology presents us with a picture that consistently shows the exact opposite of what one would expect with the Darwinian hypothesis of gradual change over time.
This is a very myopic opinion of the theory of evolution. It is very honed in precisely on what Darwin knew and what Darwin understood, which is to say, it's inadequate as far as assessing evolution. But this is a video titled The Basics of Intelligent Design, so the intent is to sort of lay the groundwork. The problem is the groundwork is inadequate. It doesn't appreciate the work.
And if I can share my screen one final time, just bringing this point of Dr. Dan really nailing this point home, is this is just how much we've learned since Darwin. This is how much the field of biology and the field of evolutionary biology has grown since Darwin. It's simply not enough to just say, okay, this is what Darwin knew and Darwin didn't. You can't be arguing from, like, if you were trying to argue against evolution and it was the year 1890, you might have a couple of valid points. It's the year 2021. We've learned so much since then.
Well, and it's telling that in order to make the case for conventional and modern intelligent design, we see individuals appealing to what Darwin knew, and indeed very quickly succeeded scientific ideas. We're not getting past the modern synthesis. We're not arguing into the 21st century. It's all really stagnated. So,
it's like arguing against heliocentrism by saying this is what Copernicus did not know. It's just the field has grown so much since then.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. All right, hold on. I got a dog barking, but we're also about to finish this. We've got like so little left.
Sure. Ever since the extent of the Cambrian explosion was laid bare by Walcott's phenomenal discovery, Darwinists have tried to come up with hypotheses that would reconcile the stubborn fact of paleontology with evolutionary theory. None of them work, however, because the facts are what they are, and trying to reconcile the fossil record with evolution is to force a square peg into a round hole. Nevertheless, in my next video, I will look at some of these Darwinian rescue attempts. So make sure you subscribe, and in the meantime, watch this video over here in which I show why evolution, if it were true, cannot possibly be used as an argument against God.
I actually want to say that I absolutely agree 100%. Evolution cannot be an argument against God. If you try and, because evolution is ultimately about biodiversity and how biodiversity forms. We can't really say, okay, life evolved, therefore atheism. That is simply an invalid argument. And the very,
Yeah. I mean, that's
and the
why
very,
the majority of religious people in the United States, and I'm only going to speak for the United States here because that's where I'm from. The majority of religious people are Christian. The majority of Christians accept evolution and the age of the Earth. We're looking at an 18% by the most recent Pew work on, or it might have been Gallup, but the most recent poll work on it. 18% young Earth creationism. So
yeah,
not only is it small, but it's been shrinking for decades. So yeah, obviously evolution doesn't disprove God. I know
right.
very few individuals who consider themselves legitimate members of the scientific community who would propose that.
Right, and my friend Dr. Stephen Freeland, he's actually pretty interesting because he's a Episcopalian. He is a Christian, part of Biologos, and from what I understand, he goes as far as to even accept abiogenesis. So there are Christians who even accept abiogenesis, and I would tend to agree with them that abiogenesis, even proving abiogenesis, is not enough to disprove God. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah,
Origami Swami says, can we say this organism evolved, therefore it was not created? What we can do is we can look and say there is a plausible pathway of evolution, therefore we cannot say that this was necessarily created, and moreover, the data is in favor against a de novo creation, because unlike the evolutionary pathway for which we have support for, we have no immediate evidence support for the designer, which is unfortunately enough, I would argue for those who are intelligent design proponents, it makes it quite a bit more difficult to argue for intelligent design. In the case of paleoanthropology or biological anthropology, when we find things like stone tools, the way we're capable of differentiating them between rocks, like a very basal hand axe from a rock, is because we've seen very basal organisms craft them. Chimpanzees and bonobos craft hand axes or very basal stone tools today. So we know what they look like. We know how they're formed. We know that there is a designer who's capable of doing so. And that allows us to create a set of criteria for design versus the naturally formed. There have also been experiments of like, what can we get from a rock rolling down a hill? Can we get something that looks like a hand axe? And the answer is no. So having that set of criteria is very helpful. That doesn't preclude intelligent design, of course, but what it does preclude is this de novo creation 6,000 years ago. I am comfortable saying that we have enough support to preclude that as an idea.
yep, I
And
absolutely agree 100%.
yeah, and I don't want to entirely write off Lucas of of Deflate right away, because he did say he's going to be going over these rescuing
Rescue the
devices,
device.
that's
Yeah,
filtering through the community, is it not?
yeah, and I will
So
say that I am looking forward to that video, and I think it'll be worth you and I maybe doing a response video together. This might be a fun project you and I could work on together, just responding to these videos.
yeah, I mean it'd be enjoyable. There's certainly a lot to go through. It'd be nice to I'll be placing the what we've kind of gone through in the description, and also grabbing in it a few additional links for, what do we know about the origin of phyla in the Ediacaran preceding the Cambrian? Of course, from an intelligent design perspective, you could theoretically just be like, fine, it's not a Cambrian explosion, it's an Ediacaran explosion, which, like, okay, all right. But I'll be putting a couple of links in the description as well. David, where are we at? What have we rounded off at here?
That is a great question, and let me just pull up the thing. So, if we could have a drum roll, please.
There it is. It's
So not,
shaking my
not counting the super chats, we have a total of $646.96, so almost $647. We can round that up. And with the super chats, that'll probably be like 675-ish. So pretty much I surpassed my minimum goal of $500, and I'm pretty much like maybe $25 away from 700. And if you didn't catch this live and you still want to donate, don't worry. It is not too late to donate. The links to the description are in the Venmo. You can donate at any time. Don't think it's too late to donate, because it is not. And if you don't mind, I will be mirroring this to my channel.
No, please
And
do, by all means.
yeah, yep. So I'll be mirroring this to my channel in case you missed it live. I'll probably do the premiere sometime tomorrow or Friday, and that will be another good opportunity to get some funds in. And once again, Erica, thank you so much for your support. I cannot thank you enough for your support. And to those who donated,
It's my
thank you.
pleasure. Honestly, it's my pleasure. And again, I am not surprised. I'm just proud of my
Yep.
audience. I mean, I knew
Yeah.
this was going to be a fun, successful evening, just because it's like my audience is really cool. They're as the kids would
Right.
say, bloggers, based, epic, amazing, amazing. So I can't thank everyone enough for being here. Now we'll probably continue to cover this series. God knows there's going to be a lot to touch on. So maybe we'll get something innovative and new, although I do doubt it. So yeah, the links will stay up as always. So my gentle and of course very modern apes, thank you again for being here. And David, if you want to touch on anything else before we end this broadcast, by all means, please do.
All right. Well, once again, thank you everyone so much for your generosity and support. Go to my channel, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and bell notification on my channel. And if you're not subscribed to Erica, you better do that right now. Subscribe to her channel and hit that bell notification. And I am working on a couple of really good interviews in the works. Dr. Freeland is coming on my channel soon. I am really looking forward to that. And that'll be sometime after the semester starts. And
cool.
And so that is something to look forward to.
With regard to this channel, there's some cool stuff coming up. I've got a video on the recent paper that was, or I guess you would say it was an observation released in Scientific Reports on the lethal coalitionary attack of chimpanzees on gorillas. So we're going to be talking about that. I got a video on, are we really 50% related to a banana? Because it turns out that number is really interesting to get into. And then, of course, as I've been advertising on this channel for like literally a month and a half now, I am still working and very close to finishing my super uber mega long video on my trip to the Ark encounter and to the Creation Museum out in the Midwest. So it's going to be really cool. And as a last minute, yeah, go ahead, David. You
awesome. Always support science. Thank you, Aaron, for the that is New Zealand dollars, New Zealand $100. Thank you so much. And,
as a last minute, photo finish, Aaron Honey comes in. Thank you, of course, very much. This goes directly to David.
You might want to use that little. You might want to use that kazoo one more time.
Yeah, let me do that. I think that's appropriate. I mean, I could do some like sick Mario Bros beats, but I really don't want to blow anybody's eardrums. I'll save that for my videos. Andrew, thank you so much. So with that, at our photo finish, we have very sufficiently, very gratuitously, and very epically reached our goal. So thank you everyone for being here. Again, this is not a surprise to me at all. I'm just proud and satisfied with everything. You guys met the need.
Once I count that in, I think we even surpassed the goal. But once she does all the fun calculations for the super chats, we'll know
exactly that'll I will, so that everyone is confident in where the funds are going as well. I'll do a community post that's like, hey, here's a screenshot of me Venmoing or PayPaling it, depending on what has the least amount of fees, to David. Everyone can be sure of where the cash is going.
Yep, I personally prefer Venmo to
Cool.
PayPal. There's no, from what I understand, there's no fee to actually send money. There's only fee on my end when I try to transfer it back.
Yeah.
But I think that Venmo probably has a little bit less than PayPal now. But either way, works fine. I just use Venmo more, especially. I actually do have a Venmo debit card, which means that since I do have a Venmo card, technically speaking, I don't have any fees now with Venmo. It's only when if I wanted to transfer it to another bank.
Yeah.
So I have two checking accounts now, and so
Captain
pretty much.
Gargle notes that I am the type to steal that money. That is true. I am a duplicitous Medusa, as I have been so affectionately dubbed by the young Earth creationists here on YouTube. The bustling, powerful, and illustrious community of Earth creationists on YouTube. So, everyone, thank you so much again for being here, and I hope to see you again soon. There's going to be cool videos here. There's going to be cool videos on David Neff's channel as we continue to combat the lame pseudoscience here on the internet, and elevate
Yeah.
science to where it should be. So
Yeah,
thank you again.
thank you so much once again. I cannot thank you enough for your generosity, and we surpassed our goal. And I would say this was really good, surpassing our goal with such a short notice fundraiser. I
You
give
can't
you
ask
mad props.
for much more. You really can't.
Yep, you have the best subscribers. I would say you have a good channel and a great
Listen,
support
David,
base.
you don't have to tell me that. I've been well aware of my excellent and super cool audience for a couple of years now. I can always count on them. So thank you
Yep.
everyone again for being here. And we'll end the broadcast. So
Yep.
cheers, everyone.